Hello, my dearest students. In this class, I'll give you 7 provocative techniques for interviewing people. So I think and I hope you'll stay tuned here and you will be writing down and making your own plan. Better to say, while I'll be announcing what technique to use, how to apply your skills, better for you to do keynotes about the guest. So imagine the guest who you want to interview and do all of that techniques, try them on, use them, because these techniques, 7 techniques, 7 tips how to make your interview being provocative. And by the way, over a Zoom class, we'll talk with you, we'll try to avoid provocations. So how to react if you are a guest and you received such a provocative question. So if you're a host, your main goal will be to get the right answer, to provoke your speaker, your guest, and use all of the provocations in order to get the best from him or her. That's why let's plan this all and study all of these 7 techniques for you. The first one, my favorite one, so where to find the idea of creating just a creative questions. The first idea and the technique will be paraphrase. What is paraphrase? So once you receive, and it's mostly a following question, but still, once you receive, you are in the middle of the conversation. So you are somewhere in the main body, like let's say in the part number 2. And here your guest starts to, and your main goal, I highlight here, your main goal is to provoke person. Not just to talk about something, but to provoke, to be unpredictable, to be very sharp in your answers, like a shark. You want to get your guest questions just right here. So the technique of a paraphrase means that you have 2 options, whether to use it as a straight paraphrase or like a camouflage. What I mean, straight paraphrase means, in both cases, it means that you paraphrase what you've just heard. So let's say if you heard about something like your speaker delivering, so in that point I decided to divorce, and you have, instead of reactions, you have 2 ways how to lead your conversation, where to lead it to. On the one hand, you have this idea of being very emotional, being vivid, and activating your guest to give you the his or her emotions. So on the one hand, you can use straight paraphrase. It means that you just paraphrase what you've just heard. In other words, in order to make it easier to understand and make conclusions or to confirm something. It's easy. So do you mean that using this, or this? That's it. That's enough. That will be your paraphrase, just straight one. Or if you want to use camouflage, like you paraphrase something and you show up from the other point of view, like you find the difference, you find something which you want to catch your guest for. It means that didn't you know at that moment that she is a victim? Let's say this one. He didn't mention that she was a victim or he was on the opposite side. He just told us a little bit more about his relationship, and we make our own conclusions. So in other words, if you want to use paraphrase, if using straight paraphrase, you don't make your own conclusions. It's just, in other words, you paraphrase what you've just heard. In the way of making a camouflage paraphrase means that you make your own conclusions. Most likely provocative. It's not just a conclusion. If you make just a conclusion, even if it's a straight paraphrase, you can do it. But here you make a different conclusion, which is not obvious here, but you point on that side. That's why your audience, our main idea why the interview is the difference between interview and conversation will be our audience. So for our audience to be very surprised by your thoughts, by your investigation and something else. So that's why use paraphrase, try to use it. Paraphrasing something in other words. That's the exercise for you can be, you just turn on any interview, you stop it anywhere before the host starts his or her questions. in the middle of the show, let's say, and you start creating this paraphrase or any other technique. Let's move forward. Second technique that I like about provocative technique will be emotional provocations. What I mean, those are the questions which are out of the script or out of the social rules, let's say, in order to grab additional emotions from your audience. Let's say if your interview is with politicians and you ask them, you think that this is an emotional provocation, like, but why did you do that and didn't do that? If it's considered about money or something which is just on the top of all discussions, most likely the person already has already prepared his answers to that. So better to use something unexpected, unpredictable for him or her. Let's say you dig deeper. That's you just need to predict what will cause this emotional provocation. I can give you an example from my class. Even my student, she had the goal of make the provocation, and she did it because she was interviewing other students, but they were not pretending being somewhere. They were the same people. So, and she asked her about her marriage, was she married or so, and the guest answered like, oh no, I'm not, we're not married but officially, but we're living together for 7 years. My student, in order to get this technique, she make a pause, a small pause, and then she asked, but you realize, you're aware that he wouldn't propose you, right? It was the close-ended question, but it was an emotional provocation. We thought this way because usually people who hear that, especially addressed to them, they will be offended. It's like an insult or something like that. But emotional provocation is only a provocation if the person, commit this provocation. So if your guest will be emotionally cut by this question, that will be emotional provocation. But in other cases, if it's okay, if it's a good question for them, they are not they are not shaken with their emotions or so, that will be just an ordinary question. So the question was a kind of an emotional provocation. But her guest, guess what she answered? She answered, thank God that he wouldn't propose me because I don't know how to get rid of him. It was a joke, a kind of something, but it was not actually emotional provocation because it wouldn't provoke her. It was okay for her. That's why if you have a plan to get and to do emotional provocation, to ask emotionally provocative question, be sure that you have plan A, plan B, all of that backup plans in order to plan all the wide range of the emotions that your guest can show you. That's why only if in the case that this question will lead to her or his high level of emotions, that can, like crying or arguing with you, screaming, who are you, or something like that, that will be your win, that will be your victory, and that will be emotional provocation. In all other cases, unfortunately, it's just a question, but it's a good one because you grab additional attention. People will adore your way of asking, your own personal style. So if you feel like it's yours, apply king archetype and do that. We'll definitely can succeed in that. The third technique for making provocations will be a hammer. You know, a hammer. Why is it called like that? Because this is the only way, the only reason where we can ask few questions in a row, like using your hammer. There are 2 questions or 3 questions in a row, but most likely those questions would be not for answers. It will be mostly for reactions or emotions. I would say, like, if you want to convict person in something, so didn't you notice that that person is not a fit for you? Haven't you heard about the relationship between victim and aggressor? Have you ever heard about abuse? So all of the questions, they will be asked not for the answer, like yes I did, or they will be asked about the reaction, for the reaction, to evoke the reaction. That's why if your goal is to give your audience and your guest idea of you being aware of everything, that you're knowledgeable enough in that, and still being and delivering the opposite side of you point of view, and asking the person to react, you can ask 2 questions in a row, because it's not important for you to receive an answer to these specific questions. This is the only reason. That's why if you want to share and show and like a trick with your guest, that you know everything about her or him, every detail, you can use this technique and just put 2 or 3 questions in a row in order to get the whole, just the common reaction on all of that. But most likely, all of the questions will be concerned about the same topic. So it's not about your different parts, like your childhood, then adulthood, or something like that. No, it will be definitely of something one, like some event or situation, something which is the topic of this part of an interview, and you use this technique to show that you show the tension, that you want this guest to be tensed and pushed in those circumstances. So do that. It's a good way of showing that you are a king, and both that you are not afraid of your guest. The worst thing is to be afraid of the guest, or to be looking up at your guest. Oh, wow, I'm so happy you're here, thank God. No, it's not an option. That's why, even if you feel this inside, use techniques and you will be in a safe hand, in a safe place. One more technique is analogy. So what is it, analogy? So why and where can we apply this technique? Let's say if your guest talk about his or her lifetime being, so nowadays, like his maybe values, and if you compare these values, so his statements, with his actions, that will be analogy. So if he stated like, I would never make such a decision, and then you see like he did it actually 10 years after, and you noticed it, or he says, I would never hurt anybody in my life, including my kids, and then you found out a detail, so maybe even later, and you compare. So analogy, it's like a comparison. So you compare, but how about this, and this? Isn't it something similar or in common? So you make an analogy, maybe even from different parts of his life, from different points of view. Because I just a few years ago, I watched one episode from the show. It's like America's Got Talent or so, and in different countries, and all the judges, how they estimate these competitions. So the participant, they were talking about like, you are not able to participate because X, Y, Z. And later, when they were at this interview, and this interview asked, but how about the song contest or something, and the person says something opposite to that statement. So she did this analogy, like, but why are you talking about this now, but you were on the opposite side just a few years ago? Isn't it obvious? So it's a hard thing to do, actually, for being an interviewer. It's a hard thing to do, but if it's your passion, you definitely should state it as a go-to point for you. Be aware of how and where, how to compare things, how to compare events, situations, and make this analogy, being again provocative and unexpected for your guests. The next one, we're almost close to the end. The next one will be the long pause. That's my favorite one, because the long pause means that you are not in a rush. You are a king on the top. You are a cherry on the top. That's why once you heard the answer to your question, don't ask now the next question. Be silent. By telling you the long pause, I mean the pause for 30 seconds even. Can you imagine? 30 seconds. In my career, I had a situation when I asked some president or so of the Ukraine, actually, asked the question, and he was not hurrying up to answer. So I asked, and this pause occurred. And instead of paraphrasing what I just asked, just wait. I waited, and he answered like it's a very complicated question in 20 seconds. Can you imagine 20 seconds of silence? It's a dead end for your it seems to be a dead end for your interview, but still it's a great chance for you to know how to captivate your audience, how to make them feel in this feeling of outstanding conversation. That's what works for you. Two techniques left actually. One of them is my favorite. It's a bluff, because what I mean here, while asking questions, don't ask it from the position like you don't know. Like how often? No, better to say, do you smoke? If you don't know, better just to ask how long will it take for you to quit smoking? Like this. You don't know if the person smokes or not, but by asking this, it's like bluff. How many times did you cheat your wife? You don't know if he did or if he didn't, but if you ask bluff, sometimes people are provoked enough. So if he cheated her, he will definitely be doubting what to say, because you're so confident in this question, because maybe you know something, because that's why he would avoid lying maybe. But if he didn't commit this thing, he will be truly, he will be really obsessed with delivering the truth. That's why both sides, this technique will cause to very emotional answers. But be sure this is the right person to use such kind of questions, because sometimes it will cost a career. But mostly this you can choose the level of these provocations. Like it can be 10 points of 10, or it can be 2 points of 10. So just small, tiny steps. But do your best. Keep in mind that we have this bluff as a technique where you don't know for sure that the person do or did something, but you ask from the point of view if he did. The last one technique that I want to share with you here will be a trap. What is a trap? The trap means that when you catch the person, it's not just a one question, because in all the previous cases, techniques, there was only one question. Here, it's not a one question. It's just a strategy to this trap. So you ask something very safe for the person. You check the details, you check her or his values, attitudes to some situations, and then you ask your most provocative question. And the person comes to a trap. Better to say, it's super hard to do actually, but if we compare, again, I saw one politician interview with a politician, and the host was asking, it was a woman who was a politician, and she was convicted in making papers or winning some competition standards or so. And that's why the host asked her, have you ever had some issues with some competitions? She said like, no, I'm not, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she shows her the papers. That means that this guest is either a liar or the thief, let's say. That's a trap. So once your guest has two exits, but both of them leads to this trap. That's how it usually built, how the provocative interviews usually are built over these TV shows. If you even use one or two techniques, that will be a great idea. So do that, try that, and better to plan it for our next Zoom class in order to get all of the experience from the class. See you.